Welcome everyone to our 2025 Digital Dealer Exclusive program here with Material Girls. This year we're going to be working on a mystery quilt. The theme of the mystery quilt is called Wallflower. I also have no clue what this looks like, so every month I'm going to be getting to see or the reveal right along with you. So it's going to be exciting to go. This first video here is going to be kind of covering how to get started, getting yourself organized, as well as making the new or first block that you have received, which is called the Cute as a Bug block. So this is kind of like a little promotional block that we have that will kind of like a warm-up that's going to get us started in this particular program. So before we make this block, I want to kind of go over how to get started and things along that lines. You are going to locate all the designs each month on the first of each month inside your Kimberbell.com account. And then you'll download that file each month. Inside that file is going to be any quilting designs that are related, going to be any embroidery designs that are related, as well as all of the particular instructions. So that's going to be where you're going to find all the designs. I am going to publish a video as close to the first of the month every month, walking through the steps of the particular design that has been released in that month. The biggest thing is to get your fabrics cut and kind of organized. In your Cute as a Bug download, you're going to find the cutting chart. So gather up your baggies and your marker, and then we're going to work through getting that cut. We are also going to need for you to decide if you're going to quilt this block by block or if you're going to wait to quilt this project once everything is completely finished and assembled. I'm going to be demonstrating in all of the videos the block by block method. If you're going to be using the block by block method, our base stabilizer that you're going to want is the light mesh cutaway. That particular stabilizer in my world here at Material Girls, we sell OESD branded stabilizer, is going to be Polymesh is the choice for that. If you are choosing to not do any of the quilting and wait till your project is complete, you're going to need a medium cutaway stabilizer as your base stabilizer for this project. Okay, and in the world of OESD here, it's also called medium cutaway. In that document, you will also find the cutting chart. Here is the cutting chart. You'll see there's a fabric number, a little fabric swatch, how much you received in a kit, or if you're doing this on your own, kind of how much you're going to need, as well as the SKU related to the Kimberbell basic fabric, the purpose or where it will go in your baggies. You're going to need a baggie for basically January through November. December is going to be our assembly month, so there's no real fabric beyond, inner border, backing, and binding. And I'm not actually going to cut any of that particular fabric until we get closer. There's no need to have all of that around. It's much easier to keep track of if it is in whole yardage versus a bunch of little strips. If they're in those strips, we have a tendency to think, oh, these must be extra. And then when we get to that month, we're like, oh no, where are this strip or that strip? You will note that there are a few directional prints in this particular fabric. Fabric F3, which is a background fabric, has a stripe to it, and fabric F28 as well. So you want to be very, very careful when cutting that to make sure that you are orienting the stripes correctly. And I'm going to show you here in a moment where to find which direction to orient them. As I said, I'm not going to cut any of my border and sashing at the moment. If you purchased a kit here from Material Girls, we did not include backing. You do not need backing until the entire project is finished. And if you're going to hang it on a wall, you may not necessarily want a print. I also wouldn't put a print that, one, is too dark on the back or has not been washed, because color can transfer from the back of the quilt to your paint on the wall, so you just want to be careful. So a lot of my projects that are intended to be wall hangings, I usually put muslin or a neutral or a white on white or something on the back, but it's completely up to you. But I would just highly recommend that you pre-wash that backing to make sure that it's not going to do any sort of bleeding or color transfer if it is rubbed up against the wall. So you're going to work through cutting all of these fabrics, associating them with the months that they will be in. You will see that there is also fabric cutting diagrams there as well for you to use. Okay, and so this is where you want to look at, like Fabrics F3 here, where you see that the stripes are running left to right, okay, across that particular measurement. And then the same with Fabric F28. You'll see over here the direction that the stripes run in that one. That one's not quite as special because it's a 2x2 square that you are cutting, so you can really rotate it. But it is very important to pay attention to the stripe in Fabric 3 because it is important, because it's a background fabric that we have there. But you do have those charts or those cutting diagrams as well. You have a cutting chart for the embellishments that you received in your kit. So you can go ahead and divvy up those embellishments and put them inside of the baggies that are associated as well. There's also a cutting diagram down there for how they intended you to cut those larger pieces of embellishment. We have stabilizer requirements that are there. So wash away stabilizer. It's not going to be used every month, but some months we may need it. In my world, that's going to be aqua mesh. The embroidery topping is a piece that came in your embellishment kit. It looks like a piece of like white trash bag, so don't throw it away. You want to go ahead and tuck it inside of the February block or your February bag. You're going to need fusible backing or fusible woven lining or SF101 for the entire project. We're going to need Kimberbell batting. If you're not using Kimberbell batting, you can use embroidery batting. You can opt to use some standard quilt batting, but it's not, if you're going to use quilt batting, it needs to be on the not super thick side, but not the super thin side. What's special about the Kimberbell project batting is it does have some stabilizer incorporated into the batting. So that kind of helps. So if you're not using Kimberbell batting and you're finding that your backgrounds and your blocks are kind of puckering and things like that, it's probably because of you're little light on the stabilizer. Flexi foam is included in your embellishment kit, and there is a cutting chart right there down below under stabilizer cutting diagrams. We have our light mesh cutaway, what we would need if you're doing block by block. And if you're doing the no quilting, you need medium cutaway. If you're doing block by block quilting, you do not need medium cutaway. And if you're doing traditional quilting, you do not need the light mesh. So those last two yellow and orange stabilizer labels right there, it's in either or. We have an embroidery thread color diagram here showing you the color reference chart as to how it's going to be shown in the instructions here down the road, and the colors that they are coordinating also with the quilting. Please note that if you purchase a thread kit, it does not include charcoal and cream. Okay, we assume that those are colors that you probably already have spools of in your embroidery stash, so we typically don't include those kind of super basic ones in any sort of thread kits. Now, here at Material Girls, we use Isocord thread. these here are the numbers or color numbers that I associated and assigned to the color chart from Kimberbell. So it's going to be kind of completely up to you. If you see a slash, a number with a color with two numbers next to it, like charcoal, it's an either or. It's up to you as to which one. You don't need both. 20 is solid black in the world of Isacord, and 4172 is definitely closer to a charcoal color, but either one of them works. And in 660 for the cream, 660 and 970, again, almost identical in color. One's a little creamier than the other, so it can be personal preference, and the same with light green. It's one or the other. If you were part of the Material Girls digital dealer exclusive membership, you received all of this information in your email, as well as the ability for you to be able to print this chart so that you can associate it, place it in your kit, and always have it there. Okay, so we're going to go ahead now and get started. So let's take a look here, and just as a reference, so we have all my months. We are all cut and organized. Everything is labeled by baggie. I've went ahead and slipped the embellishments inside of each baggie that's there and set it to the side. I'm going to take those. I'm only going to hold on to my Cute as a Bug block kit, and here is what we are going to start embroidering. This is our first block we're going to make. We're going to make 2 blocks of this particular project that we have here, and we are going to, like I said, make 2 of them. I'm going to work through one of them here on the camera, and then you're going to repeat all the steps to make a second. There's a little bit of additional prep work that we need to do to get ready for this before we start embroidering. One, we need to take a piece of fusible woven lining or fusible backing and apply it to the background fabric. Now you could go ahead and do this for every background fabric you have in each one of your month baggies. Okay, you can go ahead and do it. You're going to need to put fusible woven on the back side of all of your backgrounds. So as you're going along, or as maybe you're embroidering this particular month's blocks, you can be prepping for January's blocks and going ahead and get your background fabric with the fusible woven on it. You're going to see in the instructions here that we have, so here is the set of instructions that came with this month's block. Everything that I just showed there here is inside of this document. Okay, so it's not anything special. The only thing that I made changes to or added were the thread color information, and I just kind of assigned it using that chart. And then we have the information here. So I just kind of want to show you how we read this particular set of instructions. Right here up at the top is giving you the name of the block, tells you how many you're going to make, and gives us an image. If that way, because sometimes we make 2 blocks, but they may be 2 different color options or something along that line. So if we were making 2 blocks of the same design with 2 colorways, typically the graphics at the top of this would show you the colorways of each block. They're giving you the information or the cut information related to 1 block. And since we're making 2, we would need to have these doubled. This information here also relates back to that color chart and should be the items that are in our baggie for that particular month. If you have a cutting machine, a personal electronic cutting machine, a Cameo, Cricut, a Brother Scan and Cut, anything along that lines, you could use the SVG file that's provided on your USB stick to pre-cut the appliques for this particular project. So you'd be able to cut the body and the ladybug wings and not have to do any trimming in place. We need our fusible woven backing, which she tells us you're going to iron to the wrong side of your background fabric. After that, she tells us that we're going to need charcoal, red, and the cream that we're going to be using as your thread color or your quilting color. Now, these are all optional. You can quilt in whatever color you want. Just because she says cream doesn't mean you have to do cream. This is your quilt, your project. As long as the machine has thread, it really doesn't care. After this, we have to choose the option. Are you quilting in the hoop, or are you doing option 2, which is just no quilting, embroidery only? This is where you would then follow option 1 or option 2. Okay, option 2, you're basically going to go straight into embroidery. We're going to put in stabilizer. We're going to put our fabric to the stabilizer, put it in the hoop, and then we're going to jump into embroidery. If we're going to do block by block quilting, we have a little bit of quilting we need to do before we can get straight into embroidery. So we're going to look here. It tells us to hoop a piece of light mesh cutaway in the hoop. The first thing that I would do for this is to set up the design on my machine so I would know what size hoop I need to use. Okay, just because they tell us that we're using the 4x4 background design doesn't always mean it's going to fit in the hoop that we think. Okay, especially in the world of Berninas where our hoops are ovals and not squares. Well, a majority of our hoops are ovals and not squares. Sometimes that square can kick us up to the next hoop size. So I always like to kind of build it in the machine first and then determine what hoop I need and then put the stabilizer in. It tells us in this document here, let's zoom in here so that we can see that we're going to need to use the Floral 11, which comes out of this background collection, 4x4 horizontal design. Okay, and that's important. And then it tells us that we're going to align the block file with the quilting file, everything being centered. And we're going to walk through all of this. So we are going to come over to the machine. I have downloaded the designs to my USB stick on the machine. So I'm going to choose USB. Now your machine may be different, your screen may be different, but ultimately I'm working here on a 790 Pro screen, but for all of my Berninas, current Berninas, your screens look the same and the steps and the techniques are the same as well to achieve the final design that we're doing. Now I have put the designs in a folder called the 2025 Mystery just so that everything is nice and organized for me, and I will continue to do that every month. So on my computer, I used my USB stick. I added a folder that said 2025 Mystery, and then I've pulled over and I've created folders for the months that are coming up. We're working on Cute as a Bug, so I'm going to open up Cute as a Bug. In there, you're going to find a couple of folders. You'll find instructions, SVGs, quilting, and then embroidery files. On your machine, you're probably only going to see the embroidery files and the background quilting. You may see the other folders, but those other folders will be empty because they're not embroidery file related. When we are quilting in the hoop, the first thing we want to add to the hoop is going to be the quilting. The order in which we add things to an embroidery hoop is the order in which they will embroider. So we're going to start with background quilting. I'm going to open up the background quilting folder. I can see this month only has this one file that's there. We're going to open up that 523 Floral 11 collection. And then inside of here, there is a set of instructions, which obviously on my machine are not going to open, but there's also the embroidery files. Now, when I moved everything over to my USB stick, I only moved the format that I needed, did not move all the other formats. It just keeps taking up extra space. It's not necessary, so I only moved over the EXP file because with Bernina, that's our main format, although we can read other formats on the machine. So I'm going to open up EXP, and this is going to pop up. And you're going to be like, well, I really can't tell what's 4x4. And depending upon your machine, you may not be able to see everything that's here. So I want you just to note, it starts out with 2x10, 2x12, 2x14, and then it comes down to 2x2, 2x4, and then we work through 2x6, 2x8, and then we start at 4x10, 4x12, 4x14. If you find it challenging to know if you're opening the right design or anything like that, before you come over to your machine, when you're moving files from your computer to your USB stick, pull up your instructions and only move the file that you need. On the computer, you can read the entire file name, okay? So it's a little easier to than just move over what you need for this project. The other way is to find the file or take a guess at the file that you were wanting and then look at the size that opens. And if it doesn't match or isn't close to what you were wanting, we need to go out and choose another. So with this design, we need the 4x4 horizontal. And basically what that means is that we want the design that is running left to right, horizontal across the square. Okay, we do not want the vertical one, which is why you're going to see in your files, you'll see 4x6 twice or 4x8 twice. One is a horizontal and one is a vertical. And the reason you get them in both directions is so that depending on the orientation of that block in your particular quilt. We want we want 4x4 horizontal. So we want to have the design running left to right across the square. Now, because I do not have a hoop attached to my machine when I open it, my machine says that the smallest hoop possible is going to be a clamp small hoop. Okay? And if you have that hoop, perfect. If you don't have that hoop, we can open up the hoop settings and we would need to not go backwards in the chart, but we need to go forwards in the chart. So if I went backwards to the medium, you're going to see the medium is too small. So the next size after the small clamp is going to be the large oval. And so anything that is in the list after small clamp would fit that particular design. So we can't go backwards, we have to go forwards in the hoop list. So I'm going to go back to the small clamp because that is the hoop that I'm going to use today. And then originally in those instructions a moment ago, so just so you can see, they tell you align the block embroidery file with the quilting design so that both files are centered. Okay. So I'm going to add our ladybug design to this. So we're going to hit the plus sign we're going to come over and we're going to hit the plus sign on the screen. We're going to navigate back out of that folder and I'm going to come in and I'm going to open up the embroidery files of the Cute as a Bug folder that I have on my USB stick. I'm going to open the EXP format and there is my ladybug and I'm going to open it. Okay. In the Berninas, anytime you bring a design into the hoop, it's automatically going to center it in the hoop. Okay, so as long as you just open it and then don't touch it, the quilting and the embroidery file will be stacked one on top of the other with the centers aligned. Okay, so you can go ahead and get that particular file created. The next thing that I would recommend is go ahead and maybe you want to save this design. That way, maybe you're not ready to embroider it now, or you just went ahead and maybe you're going to make another one later down the road, or only have time to get the file set up and you're not quite ready to embroider now. So I'm just going to walk through saving designs so that you can set up some files. Maybe you're going to do, you don't have time this month, but you may have a few minutes to get this file created and saved, and then you're going to sit down and embroider next month. So once I have created my design here, okay, I'm going to go up to the folder tab over here on the right hand corner. I want to tell the machine that I want to put this file into a folder. And because I pulled this design off my USB stick in the folder related to the Cute as a Bug, that's where it's going to default to save it. If you don't want to save it inside of the Cute as Bug file, you can back up folders. I'm going to save it here. I'm not going to save it inside either of the two folders, but I am going to save it in the folder for the month. Once I get it associated with that particular month, I'm going to hit the green check mark for that particular design, and it will save that design to the USB stick for me. If you don't want to save the design to a USB stick and you want to save it to the machine, you would just choose machine. And it's going to then place the design in your personal folder that's on the machine. So the little heart folder, or however the designation on your machine will be for personal files. Again, I'm going to leave it on my USB, and then I'm going to hit check mark. Now it's saved. So if I wanted to verify that it was saved, I'm going to go out here, and you'll see there's the file. The two designs together and ready to go for us to start embroidering. Okay. Now that our design is created, we know what size hoop we need, and we need to now set up our hoop. Okay. And we need to get ready for quilting. All right. So we are going to need some batting, right? We haven't really talked about what size to cut batting, and there's no designation on the paperwork as to what size batting you need. In the embroidery instructions, or in the instructions for the quilting, okay, there is a chart for batting sizes. What we do is we find the file size that we're going to do, okay? So you can see here we're using the design that's a 4x4. It tells us that our block is going to finish at 4x4. We need batting that is 5x5. And our background fabric, which is what we cut for this, was cut at 6.5. Typically, just a mental note, if you look at the instructions here, so if I were to, let me go backwards here and show you. If I look at my quilting instructions that tell me that I'm going to use a 4x4 file, I know that I'm going to need a piece of batting that is 1 inch larger in both directions. So I would need to cut 5x5. Okay, and so I don't necessarily have to pull this chart out every time. You can see if I was working on a 4x14, I need a piece of fabric that is, a piece of batting that is 5x15. So everything is 1 inch larger. So as you are setting up and prepping for your month, if you look at the file and the quilting information that they tell you the size to use, just cut yourself a piece of batting that is 1 inch larger in both directions. Okay. If you are not quilting in the hoop, you're going to find the center of your background fabric. You are going to then cut your piece of stabilizer that fits your hoop. You're going to tape the fabric to the center of the stabilizer. Okay. Then you're going to hoop the stabilizer and the fabric in the center of the hoop, and then you're going to set up for embroidery, just like we did, just opening the ladybug design on the machine. Okay, and then we need to verify that you have center aligned correctly with the center of the hoop and the center of the machine. We want to make sure that the ladybug goes into the center of our fabric. Okay. We need to work through the quilting of this particular background fabric. The step-by-step quilting instructions are not in your document. They reference you back to the quilting instruction document, but here are the steps. We're going to hoop our fabric, or excuse me, hoop our stabilizer. We're going to load a thread color. We're going to stitch the batting placement. We're going to put the batting in place. We're going to tack the batting down. We're going to then trim the batting. Then we're going to run a fabric placement line. Put our fabric down, background fabric right side up, completely covering that placement line. Tack our fabric in place. Do not cut the fabric. And then we're going to quilt. And in step 8 there, you see that it says change to desired color to quilt. I actually run all of these steps in this section with the color that I plan to quilt in. Okay. So especially for this project right now, I'm going to be quilting. This first block calls for quilting in cream. So I'm going to load my machine with cream colored thread on top. I believe I'm using color, in my stash I had color 970, so that's the color I have currently loaded in the machine. In my bobbin, I just have neutral thread color. I am not, nothing fancy, just bobbin weight thread in white is what I have. White, gray, cream, any of those particular ones will work just fine. So let's head over to the machine and we're going to quilt our background. Okay. So I'm going to put my hoop on the machine here. I have, get it ready. Design is already created and set up. I have cream colored thread on top of the machine. I have neutral color bobbin in the bobbin. I'm going to run the placement line for our batting first. Now, once we have our batting placement line stitched, I'm going to take my piece of batting. This doesn't even have to be exactly 5 inches, as long as it's 5 inches or larger. You can see it's not cut perfectly straight, things like that. So it's going to be larger than this square. So as long as it's bigger than this square, it really can be any shape that you want it to be. Once our batting is covering all of that placement line, and it doesn't even have to be even in terms of what's above and below the line, it just needs to be covering the line, because the excess that's going to be stitched down here is going to get cut away. So it does not matter if you are a little more to the top or the left. Don't worry about it. Now you're going to notice that in a lot of the instructions, she talks about taping things down. I'm not a big taper, okay? There are some things I will tape, but not everything. And batting is one thing I just don't take the time to tape. Because it is, it's a 1/2 inch larger all the way around. I don't walk away from it. I'm standing here making sure it doesn't move, but ultimately I don't tape my batting or my backgrounds down when they're larger. Now that this is tacked down, we're going to take our scissors and we're going to trim the excess batting away from that line. And we're just cutting as close as we can to that stitching line. This line that you see here is basically the, not the seam line, but it's going to become, this is the actual real block. And we're trimming the batting out of the seam allowance. So the more batting you can get here out from around the edge, the less it'll be in your seam allowance when we go back and start sewing this all together in December. Now we're going to take this back over to the machine. We're going to put it back on the machine, and the next color stop is going to stitch us a placement line for the background fabric. Now I'm going to tell you, I don't normally stitch this line. I think it's pretty obvious as to where we're going to place our background fabric. I'm going to run it for this one, but you're going to notice as we go along here over the year, I skip this color stop. I don't stitch that. I think, like I said, it's pretty obvious where this is going to go, okay? And this is much bigger than this. Remember, this block is going to be a 4.5 inch square, and we're starting out with a 6.5 inch piece of background fabric. Okay, so I have my placement line. I'm going to take my fabric. I'm going to place it down here, making sure that it completely covers all of that line. Not really fussing too much with, again, having the same amount above and below and left and right, just as long as all of that batting is covered. You can tape this in place if you like. Again, I'm not a big taper, but I am going to keep my hand on the hoop and the fabric as it stitches around to make sure this stays taut and flat. Once our background is tacked down, we're going to now quilt. If you have not changed your upper thread color to match whatever color you plan to quilt in, you need to do that now. Now that our quilting is complete, we are ready to start on the actual embroidery. So if you are not doing quilting, this is where you would now start with your project. Okay. We are going to stitch the wing base placement line, and we're going to then place a piece of flexi foam. This is a 3.5 by 3.5 inch square of flexi foam over top of that placement line. We're going to then tack it down. Let's see here, get my cursor to work, and then we're going to trim the excess. Okay. I'm going to use cream colored thread. You'll see this designation up here just means that color of your choice. I'm just going to leave the cream colored thread that we have in the machine already in place because all of the trimming related to this flexi foam is going to get covered up with the fabric that's there. Okay. So if we head over to the machine, I'm going to go ahead and hit the start button to stitch me my placement line so I know where to put the foam. This flexi foam is just going to give our ladybug a little bit of dimension so that her wings will kind of stand out. Okay, so I'm going to take my flexi foam. I'm going to place it over top of making sure it covers all of the wing placement line. You can tape it in place if you like, but again, I don't tape. All right, we're going to pull this off the machine and we're going to trim this up. And then we're also going to change out our thread color to the charcoal color. Our next color stop is going to stitch the antenna of our ladybug. So with these, I'm just going to trim as close as you like, close as you can get, not as you like, to that placement line or that tack down. Using a scissor of your choice, I use these applique scissors probably more than any other scissor when I am trimming appliques. So there we are, all trimmed. I'm going to put him or her back on the machine, and then we're going to change our thread color to the charcoal. Okay, the next color stop is going to stitch the antenna of our ladybug. Right. Now, after our ladybug's antenna are stitched, we are going to now work through the appliquing of his body or her body. We're going to do the placement line. We're going to put the fabric over top of that placement line, completely covering it. Make sure that you place your fabric right side up. Tape if you like. And then we're going to tack it down in place. And then we will trim up the excess. Okay. So let's go over and work through those steps. So same color thread still in the machine. We're going to run the placement line. Again, that placement line could be completely optional because, it is pretty obvious as to where this black is going to go, and it is large enough, so it's completely up to you. I'm going to place my piece of fabric down here, making sure it's all covered. Fabric is right side up, and we're going to tack this in place. Let's trim up that fabric. So there he is. We're going to trim as close to the line as we can get. Again. When I trim appliques, I kind of, not too tightly, but I kind of pull or put a little bit of tautness on the fabric. It just kind of helps me get a cleaner, closer cut. So I'm just kind of holding this and pulling it away. But again, not too tight. There he is, all trimmed. We're now going to head over to the machine, and the next color stop is going to stitch the detail around the raw edges that will be exposed on our particular ladybug here. So you can see, we're going to do the body decorative outline. Just a little around his head and then at the base of the body. And then we're going to work through the steps of appliquing down her wings. Now I'm going to go ahead on the wings. I am going to change out to red thread. It's going to be the color of our cover stitch. So we might as well go ahead and change it out. And then we're going to run the placement line. We're going to then put our polka dot fabric right side up, covering all of that placement line. We will then trim and then run the cover stitch. Now, even if you do tape or you don't, you want to watch this because it is dimensional. This little guy is going to want to kind of pucker. So I highly recommend don't turn your back when you are appliquing down your wings. Just kind of be here to pull this a little taut so that you don't get any sort of puckers. And now we're going to go and trim her up. All trimmed. Back over to the machine, and we're going to run the color stop to cover up the raw edge of our wings. And then we will have a completed block. Our ladybug is finished. Isn't she cute? You can see there's that flexi foam that kind of gives her a little bit of dimension. At this point, when we are done embroidering, we can take her out of the hoop. Okay, so we are finished. So we're going to pull this out of the hoop, and our next set of instructions would be to trim this. Okay, they tell you in the instructions that you are going to trim this down to a 4.5 inch square. We're going to look at using the orange pop rulers. Okay, so there we are. We're going to change over here. Take her that direction. We want to make this block a 4.5 inch square is our ultimate goal. You have that line that tacked down your background fabric. It's the little basting box that you can see there. That line ultimately should be the measurement of our block. So if we lined up a ruler on top of that dashed line, we should be somewhere close to a 4.5 inch square. Okay. It may not be super exact, so do not rely on just trimming just to that line because it could have shrunk, could have moved a little, that type of thing. So we want to make sure that we measure this before you jump right to trimming it if you don't own orange pop rulers. Orange pop rulers in the square version, the smallest square is 4.5. we can lay that down over top of our block. The inside of this is a 4.5-inch square, and then you can drop in, I usually go 1 square larger around it, so this is the 6.5. Just gives me a little bit more for me to hold on to, and then I'm going to trim. I'm going to tell you that a rotating mat is going to be your best friend when using an orange pop ruler or standing like on the corner so that you can cut 2 sides and then come back and cut 2 sides without really having to move this block. I want to show you something just in case you own one or have one or need a reason to get one. This is the So Tights magnetic rotating mat. Okay, he's an 11-inch circle basically. I'm going to take my block, I'm going to set him on top, and I'm going to put my 4.5 down. I'm going to drop my 6.5 on top of it. I'm going to get it lined up where I want it. So this, you can see why I say a rotating mat is going to be helpful. But what's nice about this mat, again, it's magnetic. Okay, they sell magnetic rulers. They have like these little boosters in them that you can stick your ruler on top of, or these magnets that come with it. Let me see. I think I have one down here somewhere, but I don't see it at the moment. But anyway, these are the little pegs that come, and they stick to this mat. So I'm going to take and drop them on top of my orange pop rulers. That is going to help hold my orange pop ruler. It takes a lot for me to get this to move. Okay, so it's like having 4 extra hands, and you buy a pack of boosters and you actually like 6 extra hands that are there. And so I'm going to line this up, centering this ladybug exactly where I kind of want him to be, and I'm going to trim. What's also nice about the orange pop rulers is they are kind of notched in the corner so that you can start outside of where you need and then go beyond the corner to help try to make sure that you trim those corner threads that are there. And then I can lift that up. And voila, I have 2 perfectly trimmed ladybugs at 4.5 inches. All right. That is going to be what your work is for our little introductory into our Wallflower mystery. You're going to take them after you've got them trimmed. You can slide them into your baggie that you have designated out for this particular block or this particular month, and then place it in your little vinyl Wallflower bag so that you can keep everything where you can find it when we go to assemble in December. And just a little hint at the end of each month's video, I'm going to kind of give you a hint as to what to expect for the following month. So here is your January hint. I hope that you enjoy this month's project working on your 2 cute little ladybug blocks. And I look forward to seeing you back here in our next video as we tackle our January mystery block. Have a great month, everybody.